On this episode of Story Time with Surly, I'm driving down Interstate 10 in a 2016 Chevy Silverado. We're doing some transmission work on. Anywho, this particular story is about my mother, who is a mechanic in her own right, mainly just out of necessity. I tell this story because yesterday I met with someone. They asked me to come check their vehicle out. It's a 2004 Cavalier. Weird tapping noise. It's 170,000 miles. It needs an oil change. A little bit of lifter noise. Nothing I'd be concerned about with the age and the mileage. Told them just get a fresh oil change and we'll revisit it after that. Turns out that this gentleman knew my mother and my stepfather back when they were both alive. Obviously, he doesn't know them now because they're not here. And it just got me to thinking about this one time. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the Chrysler Lebaron from the late 80s, early 90s was also rebadged as a Maserati. I want to say it was a TC. I could be wrong. Maserati something or other. So basically it was a Chrysler LeBaron with a turbocharged 2.4 liter, I believe, that they rebadged as a Maserati. It was hilarious. Anyway, my mom had one of these in the LeBaron trim. It was white with a white top, convertible, drop top, and the white, like 14-inch mesh spoke wheels. And it was the GTC or something like that. I have to look up. I'll put it in the description. I do know that it was turbocharged, a turbocharged 4-cylinder. The top worked half the time and was just stuck in the down position the other half the time. It had the maroon red interior with the matching like pinstripe down the door and the fender and stuff. It was top of the line in the mid 90s, and I want to say this was like around the time I was like, starting to get interested in driving, not so much working on stuff. So late 90s. Well, we were going fishing or coming back from the creek or headed to the creek, or oh my goodness gracious, look at this NSX. I wish I could show y'all. I'm gonna have to pull over. I'm hyperventilating. That's a beautiful ass car. I mean, beautiful car. Pardon my language. My kids are watching. Anyway. Gosh, that's a beautiful car. So this LeBaron, we were on the way back from fishing or swimming. I don't remember what we were doing. Tops down because it has to be. It's Texas heat on red maroon colored leather. Hotter than the Hebrews in the desert outside. And the radiator explodes on it. So imagine you're driving down the interstate at 60, 65 miles an hour. I forget what the speed limit was this time. And the radiator explodes as you're driving into the wind, and you're getting sprayed with 200 plus degree a mixture of water, coolant, and pepper, because I guess she thought that would seal the little pinholes in the radiator. And I remember she popped the trunk, grabbed the gallon of coolant or water or whatever it was, and she had like a quart-sized container with pepper in it. And I wish I was exaggerating. She dumped a bunch of pepper in this thing, and it smelled like somebody was cooking. She dumped a bunch of pepper in it, topped it off with water, and we made it home barely. I don't even know why I got over it. I guess that NSX threw me off. Anyway, we got home barely in time for this thing to overheat again. And I mean, it's a Chrysler, so you know you overheat it, and there's always some potential for, well, anything really, but especially a Chrysler, there's always a potential for some kind of issue. I don't recall it having an issue past it needing a radiator, and I'm fairly certain, funny enough, the air conditioner worked on it, which didn't help a whole lot, top down in the heat, being a passenger and everything. But it was just a funny thing to think about. I guess I could segue into another story. I only got about 5 minutes in on this one. For my 14th birthday, my mom at the time was driving a Ram Charger, the ugly little SUV trucks. Had a 318 in it, and I don't know if it was a 3-speed manual. I can't remember if it was a 3 or 4-speed manual. I'm fairly certain it was a manual transmission because one of the gears didn't work in it. You had to skip over like second to go to fourth or something. That's been 26 years ago, 27 years ago, almost 30 years ago. Well, for my 14th birthday, I remember, because we had cake, I changed out the spark plugs on this 318, and I remember this as one of the first times I ever sat down inside the engine bay of a vehicle and worked on it. Like, you sit on the wheel tubs and, like, pull the spark plugs out. It was pretty cool, because most of the vehicles I'd worked on up to that point were little 4-cylinders, lawnmower engines, go-kart engines, dirt bike engines. And I pulled the spark plugs and, as a gift to her, swapped out. And this is when you get spark plugs for like $1.50 a piece. So it was $10 and an hour out of my time. It wasn't a real big deal. I say $10, it was like $15. But just meeting this guy kind of set off these memories of my mother and how mechanically inclined she was, just based off of a need to be able to fix it herself because she couldn't afford to take it to anybody. I've seen her under the hood of a car more times than I ever saw my stepdad. And I'm not downing my stepdad, but that's just the truth of it. My stepdad was not really mechanically inclined. He liked cool cars, but he wasn't about to climb under the hood and do nothing. I'm fairly certain, if I remember right, I'll throw a third little extra story in here for my brother and sister. So my mom had a early 90s F-150 with a 5-liter in it. That the starter solenoid was a fender mounted starter solenoid. The starter solenoid went out and in order to start it, she had to use a screwdriver. And my stepdad was so afraid of it, she'd have to go out there and start it for him in the morning for him to be able to go to work, because he just didn't like fooling with it. So just, it's not a masculine, feminine thing. It's just a funny thing to me. Like, I couldn't imagine being so afraid of something that I'm gonna have my wife do it. It's just a funny story. So a big shout out to the gentleman, Mr. Ben. I won't say his full name on here, but Mr. Ben with the Chevy Cavalier. That's greatly appreciated. I'm glad you remembered my mother. And thank you for calling on me to check your vehicle over. Again, guys, these stories are for my kids, but I'm sharing them with everybody on this platform just for the sake of doing it, because most of them are mechanically related, because that's been not who I am, but just what I've done for the past, forever, as long as I can remember. working on stuff. I mean, that's just how I grew up. So, shout out to Peyton, Lillian, and Timothy. Always do the right thing, and I'm going to say this at every video. Oh, railroad tracks. Always do the right thing, even when nobody's watching, especially when you think nobody's watching. All the time, 100% of the time, just do the right thing. So that's it for this episode. I believe this is episode 15, which is kind of cool. I've never run a series this long. My previous history and lack of follow-through would kind of end that, because I would try to garner people's interest. I don't really care if you're interested at this point. Like, I'm just speaking my story, and I think we should all do that, regardless of whether you want to do it on a social media platform or in your own home. Be yourself. Speak on your own stories. Anyway, this is the Surly Mechanic. Make sure you like, subscribe, question, comment, concern, criticize, chastise. Somebody liked jazzercise, so jazzercise. Right now I'm doing 10 over the speed limit for whatever ridiculous reason. Y'all go over to LSI Performance's page. I work in conjunction with LSI Performance. I do a lot of their social media stuff on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. LSI Performance 22 is the TikTok page. I'll put everything in the description in a little bit. But again, thank you guys. Stay tuned for episode 16. No telling what I'll think of between now and next Wednesday. So, later.